I came home one night and my dad was there partying with a bunch of his friends and put a vial of cocaine underneath my nose. Trying to do my best as a parent, man. I didn't have the greatest role model, that's for sure. My dad was really bad at dadding. And sometimes I feel like I'm navigating by the stars, and I realize this week that I got to circle back with my son, Hollis. And have you ever heard that cliche? And I think it goes something like this, like the sins of the father are also the sins of the son, something like that.
I've heard it. Yep.
So I think I got to swing him back around. I think I made a mistake here. Not a mistake, but it's sort of a lifestyle that I've had for a long time. And I'm nervous. I have glorified partying to my kid. And I think I got to swing back. And I'm not exactly sure how to reverse it. But I do know that I've made a mistake and I want to try to correct it. So
at least you recognize it.
Yeah, that's the first part. Actually, it was Amanda that recognized it and made the suggestion. And she was 100% right after I thought about it for a while. So just let me be completely real with you. I come from a hard-charging family. My dad was a big-time partier and didn't hide it at all. You talk about glorifying it. One of the saddest stories that I think I've ever passed on to you guys is that I came home in high school from being out with some friends, and I came home one night, and my dad was there partying with a bunch of his friends and put a vial of cocaine underneath my nose. The spoon from the vial, put it right under. It's like, hey, give this a try. And I was like 17 years old at the time. So that's the kind of sort of party environment that I grew up in.
Not the healthiest.
Not the healthiest at all. And even as I'm telling that story, I'm starting to get tight in the chest, realizing like how incredibly dysfunctional that is. And there was drinking all around my house also. And I'm not blaming my dad for this, but look, that's kind of where I learned my drinking habits. And when I started drinking in high school, I went from 0 to 100 very, very quickly. I was binge drinking my entire life. I was not scared of trying this and that. In fact, I was encouraged to try this and that. And I experimented with it all, right? And I've paid the price for that as an adult also, as I have now finally been able to put a governor on my drinking. And it wasn't something that I mentally set out to do. It's just like I've lost the taste for drinking, really. And I just don't drink the way I used to. So I can't even say that's anything that I've done and I've accomplished. I just lost the taste for it. But I think over the years that I have set the pattern up, or Hollis is I've probably shared too many stories with my youngest to where I might be glorifying partying. Mm-hmm. And I think it's time to circle back to him and say, man, these are all the mistakes I made. I look back at it and with fun. I mean, I had a great time. That is for sure. And nothing truly, thankfully, bad ever happened to me, but good Lord, it sure could have. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I've shared this story with you before. And if you guys have kids in the car, you probably want to skip on this one.
But we're going to leave the vial of coke in. You should have hit him up with that one a lot earlier. Sorry.
So this is going to sound even worse than that. I just have never been able to put a governor on my partying. And after high school, in college, I was doing so much cocaine that one night my heart started palpitating and my fingernails turned all white. And I was telling a friend of mine that, who is a firefighter, and he's like, I just want to let you know when that happens, you got about a 50-50 shot of surviving that kind of night. And that was the last time I did any of that. All right. When I was close to death, okay, that was a pretty good sign. But I think that I have sort of glorified it with my son, and I think I got to go back and I gotta tell him some of the close calls that I had and how stupid it really was, and also how it's affected me in my adulthood as well. I certainly have gotten myself into a lot of situations that I wouldn't have gotten into had I not been numbing. And I don't want him to grow up with that. And he's going to be leaving for college here in a couple of months. And I'm just afraid that I've built a foundation like, hey, you know what? College is also for experimenting and having a good time. It's not only about academics, but you're going to make new friends and have new experiences. And I just want to make sure that I haven't set them up to fail.
I get that. I feel like it's a great time now because I know in my family, I watched a lot of like my uncles and the older guys struggle with drinking. They drunk really heavily, and that was just what I witnessed. And I think at a certain point in my life, I kind of naturally went that route too, just because I've seen that's what they did. But as I think reflecting upon that now that I'm older, I realize how that didn't help them and how unhealthy it really was. Right. And I think that's a part of the reason why I stopped drinking as much now.
I also feel like for him to get to the point where because I feel like everybody who goes through a party phase gets to the point where they realize it's not that fun anymore. And I think regardless of the way you were raised or your opinions on partying, if you ever go down that route, I feel like most people get to a point where they know when to rein it in. Like I grew up completely opposite to how I'm assuming you painted partying to Hollis. Like I grew up very, very Christian, was told no drinking whatsoever until I turned 18. And my mom was like, why aren't you drinking more? But I grew up thinking I would never be someone who would go out and drink or do any of these things. And then when I went to college and I started experimenting and I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. I still got to a point where I'm like, this is my limit. You know, it's fun, but it's not that fun. But I feel like for people to get to that place where you're able to rein yourself in, you have to go down that route. And so I really feel like no matter how you raised him, I mean, I'm glad you didn't put cocaine under his nose, but I feel
at least better than my dad.
I feel like regardless of the reins that you put on him in his childhood, I still feel like people are going to go to college, people are going to experiment, and they have to figure out where their limits are and boundaries are for themselves so that they can enforce it throughout their life without feeling like I'm doing this because my parents said so, or I'm doing this because my parents said not to do that.
Yeah, and I've got a couple of thoughts on this also. Is like, I've always known the governor. Like, there always comes a part in the night where I say to myself, like, you can either go in here and you're going to go hard, or you could stop right now. And I never had the discipline to go, let's just stop. You know, it's just going to be more fun if I do this more, or I do that even more, or I do that more. And I want to have a talk with him that, do you have that, you know, that governor in your head that's telling you that now it's time to make a decision? And are you making smart decisions?
But is not having a governor genetic?
Oh.
Yeah, and I don't know. His mom has that on her side too. You know, you guys, if you're a new listener, my wife battled addiction to painkillers also. And she drank some wine back in the day also. So we've both attacked those demons.
I feel like this is going to be the tough conversation. And the older you are, the more you can accept this. When you're young, it's like, but it's not fair. But life isn't fair. And at some point you have to accept that and not make excuses that, well, this isn't fair, so I'm going to do this anyway. So knowing your family history and knowing his mom's family history, I think you need to have like a really tough conversation, a tough love conversation that, you know, because of your family history and maybe genetics, I'm not sure, I'm not a doctor, but you're going to have to be a little more diligent because it might be harder for you than others to put a governor on because that's just the history of our family. And is it fair? No. But these are the cards we're dealt, and we have to know how to handle them accordingly. So especially before he goes to college, just be like, I want you to be mindful that just because, you know, Todd can do this over here doesn't necessarily mean you can, and you're going to have a similar outcome because your outcome may be completely different.
I also now question the wisdom of being 100% honest with him over my past. And his mom has taken that route also, where he knows everything that we did. And my thinking at the time was like, you can always come to me because we've seen it all. We've experienced it all. So come to me. Don't be embarrassed. If you do have a problem, then come to me. And now I wonder, in looking back at it, that maybe we should have taken a different route.
I don't know if you should take it a different route. I mean, maybe, hey, life is full of regrets. Maybe you should have disclosed more. Maybe you should have disclosed less. I will say, thanks for, you know, being a role model for us. Jimmy's never going to know about my dark years. Mama's taking those to the grave with her.
Until I tell him.
I think it's probably different for everybody, but I know for me, my family was big on protection and not really telling you about those times. And looking back on it, I feel like it benefits you to know because, one, you can learn from both. You know, you learn from the good, you learn from the bad. And two, I think at some point it was important to know that my parents made mistakes as well, so that I didn't beat myself up so much when I did. So for me, I think if I did have kids, I would be really transparent.
Yeah, he knows very well that his dad is flawed.
Yeah.
He's very aware of that.
But I think what you're saying here is you're worried that you haven't portrayed the partying as a mistake, but rather like all these grandiose times.
Yes.
Yeah, that there is trying to figure out how to relate to him. Like, I know I made this sound really fun and really cool, but in actuality, you need to dial it back.
Hey, Ray, good morning. You're part of the Bert Show. Hello.
Good morning, guys. How you guys doing?
Good. Thank you for calling.
Thank you. I just want to touch up on, I heard what Mo said when he go around people drinking and stuff, because I go around people drinking, and I thought it was cool, and then I started drinking, and then about 10 years ago, I fell asleep behind a wheel and crashed my car, almost ended my life.
Man.
So I got a crack and crushed L2 on my spinal cord, but I'm not paralyzed, and I'm watching my daughter grow up, so just wanted to put that story out there.
Yeah, I appreciate you calling very much. It's one of those stories, though, like when you tell a 17-year-old or an 18-year-old a story like that, it's totally lost on them. It can't happen to me,
They're
man.
invincible at this age.
I'm invincible,
I mean, they may or they may not get it, but I do think it's important to have it because, in all honesty, I learned more. Hangovers taught me more about drinking than anybody in my family did.
Well, that's why I think the honesty is important for both ways. Like, be honest about the fun parts, but also be honest about the mistakes that you made and how it affected you. Because it's one thing to hear it from a stranger on the radio, but it's another thing to hear about the mistakes from your dad.
Yeah, I mean, he still sees me limping around a little bit, and that's because I jumped down a flight of stairs at a fraternity party, and I was hammered. The flight was great, the landing gear, not so much. And it's never quite been the same. So I think it's time to circle back and talk to him about it.
The Bert Show.